So this morning, I spoke a bit about meditation. And again, I define meditation as abiding. And so now I'd like to say a few words about inquiry. I like to define inquiry as curiosity. And the reason I do is when you define inquiry as curiosity, there's no end to it. When we're on a path of awakening, and especially when we tune into the non-dual teachings, the direct path, self-inquiry is a core practice. And so self-inquiry is ultimately the question, who am I? What am I? What is aware? These are conceptual means to turn consciousness back on itself. We could say taking the backward step. And when we do that, and when we recognize the fruit of that practice, it's of course not a conceptual answer. That's all mind stuff, and it's relatively useless when it comes to awakening, even if it is spiritual or awake concepts. But the direct experience is space, we could say, is recognizing oneself as the witness of experience, the awareness that's watching the mind, watching experience. And it's formless, we could say. And so when we take that backward step, and we could say enough of our awareness, enough of our consciousness disidentifies from the mind stuff, from the ego structure, then this thing called an awakening experience can happen spontaneously. It's an identity shift. Enough awareness out of the mind, shift, snap. Foreground, background shift. It can be very simple or it can be very dramatic. It doesn't really matter ultimately. And so we could say at that point, when that happens, we know ourselves as awareness. We can say with authority, I am awareness, I am the witness. I followed that path of negation to its ultimate conclusion, which is a direct experience of nothingness. And I am that. So we could say that's traditional inquiry, that's the fruit. But somewhere in our unfoldment, there will be this deeper curiosity that begins to unfold. And it's not so much of the directionality of not this, and backing up into the witness. It's more about the witness somehow getting curious about that which it's watching. So we could say it's more along the lines of this, and this too, and this too. These are words to describe an unfoldment where that awareness, that transcendent awareness, is attempting to find its unity with form. Form being thought, emotion, sensation on the inside of our experience, but also world, physical objects. And so we could say on some level that's the completion of the awakening process on the level of experience, where oneness is recognized, the non-separation of awareness and its objects. Unity consciousness, we could say. At a certain point, there's a potential for us to drop out of consciousness completely, and you can't really say anything about that, but it's a possibility. But the embodiment of this recognition and realization on the level of our everyday experience, it translates into to what intensity of emotional experience can we be with and not move. And so I often describe the embodiment process as this drilling down into experience. We wake up and out of the mind structure, and then that wakes up and out attempts to wake down and in. And it's curious. It's love coming back for itself. And so it's piercing through the mind and the conceptual layer of our experience. It's moving more into the heart, we could say the emotional layer of our experience, and it's on the inside, not on the outside, it's on the inside now. And then we could say even deeper, it's dropping into the body, into the energy system, right at the core of the root of matter, we can say, or solidity. Really what I mean by that is the most gross layer of consciousness. So we could say matter, we could say the earth element, we could say the root chakra. It's just solidity. And so the invitation is, how deep can consciousness go into solidity and not go back to sleep? Not re-identify. And so this invitation, or this definition of inquiry as curiosity, is this is where it really fits in. When we've waken up to whatever degree and we're finding shrapnels of the ego structure arising. When we find this situation where the repression barrier somehow begins to dissolve, our deep unconsciousness just is arising right on the surface of our experience. This, of course, is the translation of the recognition of non-separation on the level of the psyche. That separation dissolves too. And so there's a way to find space around contractions and emotions, and then there's a way to somehow tease consciousness to the inside. And that's more where the inquiry or the curiosity is more along the lines of welcoming emotions. There's a way of waking out of the mind and seeing through its story, its narrative. And then there's a point where we'll come into these bits that just aren't transmuting. These points of solidity in the psyche. And so when we've tried to transcend the crap out of them and it's still not working, that's where we can try a different modality, more along the lines of welcoming, opening to emotions, opening to energies. And of course, when we do this, we have to somewhat be not interested in our own story, in our own narrative. Because this allows us to just go directly to the emotions, to feel them directly without analysis. And as we drop deeper into the emotions, we get to very deep and primal energies, we could say, almost as if we're tapping into the collective unconsciousness or the archetypal energies. I mean, most of us don't have a problem with the positive and the light emotions and energies. Most of us have challenge with the dark and the contracted. And so, as our deep unconscious begins to unfreeze and unthaw, these emotions can arise. Emotions like fear, terror, like anger, rage, sadness, grief, shame, guilt, hatred, loathing. There's a point where we can sort of make a distinction between the different emotions, but when we drop in deep enough, we can't really even find where one starts and the other begins. It's just a primal matrix of contraction. It's very uncomfortable. The attachment aversion mechanism is firing in full force, trying to get away, trying to get away, trying to get away. The survival mechanism is likewise trying its best to keep it together, to hold it together, to micromanage our experience. But what I'm pointing towards, or what I'm trying to give a sense of, is that there is a possibility to go in and through any and every contraction, regardless of how contracted it is, how old it is, how wounded it is. There's a way where we can drop to the center. But on some level, we could say it requires us to be very curious. What is the truth? It requires a certain commitment to truth, regardless of what it feels like. And there's a certain utility to sharing the good news of awakening and kind of putting a carrot out there of what you can get from awakening, how good you can feel, how free you can feel, how many divine qualities you can experience. But that only takes you so far. If you're more interested in just living free as a human being, you'll find that you have to go past that orientation of consumption. What do I get from enlightenment? What if it's not about you? What if this whole thing, including our entire awakening process, was never about us? It was really about that cleaning us out so that it could use us. People often find when they're on a spiritual path, like they're seeking enlightenment, they're seeking God, and more experiences are coming, and more clarity is coming, and they're going somewhere, they're close, they're getting it. And then it's as if kind of the game changes, where that space, that divinity begins stalking you. Meaning that you've dipped into it, you've tasted it, and now it wants all of you. And you can't get away from it. That's where you see this non-dual thing is really true. Oh my God, it's everywhere. It knows. How is it finding me? So, of course, on this path of awakening and its unfoldment, there's beautiful moments, blissful moments, ecstatic moments. And there's also, like life, moments of grittiness, of intensity, of uncomfortability. But that uncomfortability does not have to equate to suffering. Pain can be, emotions can be. But if there's nothing in us that's pushing them away or reaching towards a different experience, it can quite effortlessly pass through. Maybe not instantaneously, but relatively quickly. And the deeper we go, the quicker it can be. And so this is, of course, why I like to define inquiry as curiosity, and why I like to point towards non-fixation. Because if that consciousness, that awakeness, wants to go into a dark corner of your psyche, or if it wants to go into an ecstatic space, the only thing that wants to direct it either way is a subtle center, is a subtle self. I often like to say that at a certain point on our unfoldment, we begin to notice this movement of disillusion. At a certain point, it's all about experiences. How many glimpses of truth can I have? And it is about experience. Blissful experiences. Peace. Stillness. Deep silence. But there will be a point where it's not so, that will still be there, but it's not so much that it's centered there anymore. It's really about just dissolving you, dissolving the center. And that can, it can confuse people, and it can also scare people too. Because that's where you really realize that it's not about you anymore. What you can get. It's just about returning to an utter simplicity. It's about returning back to where you've never left. This boring humanity. This is it. Everything's the dream, including our own awakening.